My name is Cynthia Colarusso, and I'm here today to talk to you about the illusion of transparency. I've decided to start my speech today with a story related to the illusion of transparency. Quite a few years ago, I did my first public speaking event at work. We had a educational event where we had a lot of new hires coming into the hospital, and they needed some nurses to do some presentations on advanced life support care, and I had happily volunteered to do it. I knew the content well. These were all peers, colleagues, administrators, and I had no feelings of nervousness towards doing the presentation until I got onto the podium and I stood in front of 40 people and this huge forum, and I was completely overwhelmed by my nerves. My palms were sweating, my heart was racing. I was totally nervous. I felt like my whole audience knew it. Didn't even know if I was covering my bullet points correctly. It was a terrible experience, and I just had to finish the presentation and get off that podium. And that's all I cared about. And when it was done, I felt like I completely bombed it. And I was just embarrassed by the whole situation until later that day when my administrator came up and told me what a great job I had done and how happy they were with the presentation. So I had created my own illusion of transparency by allowing myself to believe that my audience could read my emotions when they never did. And so it's an example of how the illusion of transparency can create false vulnerability. If any of you have ever done a speech, a presentation, publicly doing a project in front of a group, anything like that, where your feelings of anxiety are increasing, you're feeling nervous, people are watching you, you start to get a sense of nervousness. That can people tell that you're nervous? Can people read your inner emotional state? Or you become vulnerable to that, and it can be a very negative effect on public speaking or anything that you're doing where you have an audience. There were two researchers that had done a lot of studies on the illusion of transparency, Gilovich and Savitsky, and they had said that people tend to overestimate the degree to which people can read your thoughts and emotions, and that we feel that our emotions become leaked out when we're getting that sense of nervousness, and that we start to feel that people can pick up on emotional cues that we're so desperately trying to hide when we're feeling nervous, such as public speaking, telling a lie, feeling guilty, feeling of disgust when you eat something you don't care for. These are all examples of ways where we feel that the illusion of transparency may evolve. The illusion of transparency allows us to feel vulnerable, falsely believing that our emotions are being read by the people around us. So through the speech, I want to talk a little bit more about what the illusion of transparency is, how it affects us as people, and what are the tools that can help us to overcome this phenomenon. The illusion of transparency, as I stated before, is a phenomenon where we are feeling, as public speakers, as presenters, that our internal emotional state is being read by our audience. We become vulnerable to our nervousness and our anxieties. An author, Itamar Schatz, had written an article where he had explained that the illusion of transparency causes people to overestimate the degree for which we can be read, that we attribute that inability to adjust by attempting to look at how our audience is perceiving us. There's something called the anchoring effect, when we anchor our own judgment and our own emotional state, but while we're attempting to see how we appear to others. These are types of definitions, types of ways of explaining the different ideas around the illusion of transparency, all within the same realm of creating a state of vulnerability where we start to have an illusion and believe that others can sense how we're feeling, when research has proved that's just not the case. They don't. It's not. They find that our audiences do not know how we are feeling emotionally, even when we are feeling very nervous and anxious. So how can this affect us as people? What can this do to us, really? Well, it can actually have a very negative effect on us. It can create false anxiety. It can make us feel very vulnerable to people reading our emotions. This can amplify anxiety, embarrassment. This can create a very negative effect for a public speaker. It can ruin their speech. It can cause them to almost derail in the middle of their presentation, start apologizing, create a very awkward environment for a public speaker. Um, it creates a very negative effect on someone who's trying to present. Sidvitsky and Golovich had also said that people exaggerate the extent of that internal state. They overestimate that people can detect their internal feelings. And that is how the illusion of transparency works. So it can get to the point where individuals have actually reported having such high levels of anxiety from this that it affects their work, it affects their education, it affects their lifestyle, it can even affect their social interaction. So this phenomenon can have a very, very negative effect on a person as a whole, much less a public speaker. So, how do we deal with that? How can we lower the level of anxiety and understand the illusion of transparency better to overcome these feelings? Well, again, we're going to take a look at the research. And research has shown that simply informing a speaker that the illusion of transparency exists has produced less nervousness, more confidence, and better communication. Just to know that the idea exists, that we create our own anxiety, and that our audience truly can't read us, can increase our confidence level that much. Another tool that we can use is to request feedback. So we can go to a trustworthy colleague and ask them to preview our speech. We can present our speech to them and ask them if they could read our internal emotional state. Did they know that we were feeling nervous? And they'll give us positive feedback and give us more confidence as public speakers. So I hope that you can understand that even though this can have a very negative effect on people as communicators, if you can use these tools to understand it, this won't have any effect on you. You can easily overcome all of this and become a good public speaker and a confident communicator. So in conclusion, I hope that you can take away from the speech, as I have, that although we may feel nervous when we get up to do public speaking and we may feel anxious, that our audience truly cannot read our emotional state, and that that illusion is easily dismissed, knowing that it really just is an illusion and that we can all become confident public speakers. And that's it. Thanks so much.